Let's convert our Starlink dishy to run natively without power over Ethernet or power injection off 12 volts. Hi folks, I'm Roger from Offgrid, and in this second session or second episode we are going through the process of changing the electronics or making some changes to your Starlink dish in order that you can run this natively off 12 volts without power over Ethernet and power injection, as some people like to call it. So previously we had taken you through the process of where we took our whole Starlink dish and got this separated from this. So this is where all the good stuff is. This is just a surprisingly heavy housing that has the motor inside here that does all the orientation. At some stage I'll weigh this and we'll put it down somewhere in the comments or so that you know exactly how heavy this thing is. And it is surprisingly heavy. When I weigh this just by hand and compare it to the actual dishy, there's way more weight in there than there is here, I think, or maybe a little bit less. So we're going to get rid of more than 50% of the weight just by chucking this away. There's lots here that we don't need. We'll be adding some more back on here, obviously. Now, to describe what we're going to try and achieve in this, basically, you've got this plug here, which we're going to cut off. Let's cut it off right away because we do need it. So we're going to do the unthinkable and take this with our side cutters somewhere. Here they are. And we are simply going to take this white cable. This is where the internet connects onto. And we may as well do it quite close because we don't need that. And that is now cut. Now we can toss this. This cable here is for running of the motors to orientate the dish. So basically this whole thing hinges around and that moves around. We don't need this for what we're going to do. So that's now dead waste. Let's get rid of it. And we are left with this cable, which we are going to attach to Ethernet. As you can see, it's got this sort of standard Ethernet type twisted cables here for a Cat 5 or a Cat 6 cable. So what happens is the power comes through from your router, your Starlink router, that standard router that you get with Starlink, and that 75-foot brown grey cable that is so famous, way too long for most people's needs and sometimes too short for some people's needs. But anyway, it's a big bulky cable. You don't want to be traveling around with that. You don't want to install that whole long 75-foot cable onto an RV or a motorhome. So basically that router injects 48 volts into the 75-foot cable. And the reason it does that is that low voltages over such thin wires, you'll have a considerable voltage drop across 75 foot. And what arrives here would be considerably, if you were to inject 12 volts along that cable, you would have a significant voltage drop here that you would need to take into account. It is way more efficient in terms of the cable size, etc., to inject 48 volts at the router. So that comes all the way along your 75-foot cable, and basically 50 volts is the sort of limit for safety concerns, and that, so 48 falls into that. So you inject 48 volts into that, that comes down, this thing connects onto here, so that comes into the board here. There's 48 volts. Basically it arrives at this point here. I'll just point with my soldering iron at this point here as 48 volts and comes out of there as 12 volts. So what we are going to be doing, as you'll see, is we are going to be removing this and we are going to be removing that, and we'll be putting our positive onto there and our negative onto there. But first, let me just give credit to the various people that have given me a lot of information. And the guy that has given the most detailed information around the circuitry changes is I believe a Ukrainian called Oleg Kutkov or Kutkov. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. His information and his assistance has been incredibly vital for this. And I guess the Ukrainians currently need to run these things as efficiently as they can out in the field. And so you've got some very bright guys there that have been experimenting and playing around with these Starlink dishes, and it's this version that you can find primarily in Ukraine at the moment. So Oleg has got some YouTubes that are really great that you should subscribe to, and he's got an article, a website detailing all of this, a blog detailing all of this, and I'd highly recommend that you watch that or watch his YouTubes and visit the website and have a good look at the content there. The second person I'd give credit to is somebody on Motorhome Fun. It's a forum that I am a member of and attend, and his handle on there is Mr. B at this time. He could change it in the future, who knows, but at the moment it's Mr. B, and I think his real name is Dave Beverly. And Dave has come up with some absolutely brilliant ideas that you'll see in the next session or the next episode around how you build some structure around this. He's also made this change successfully, but he's decided to inject 12 volts over a shorter cable back into here and then straight basically from here into there. So that's something that Dave has done, which I think is brilliant. So what he's done is, I think, outstanding. And I don't know if he's got a website or a blog or anything, but and for that matter, I don't know if he's done any YouTubes. But you'll find him active on motorhomefun.co.uk. It's a forum that I'd highly recommend if you're not already a member. Incredibly good information on there, fantastic repository, no nastiness on that forum. Jim, the ringleader, as he calls himself, makes sure that there's no unpleasantness and there's healthy banter and chatter and disagreement, but never unpleasantness. So highly recommend. The third person is a guy called Richard. I don't actually know what his full name is, but Richard in his YouTube, I think, is Aussie8, and he's done a lot of this, and I think he's planning to do a similar YouTube to this. So I would recommend that you get onto YouTube and look for Richard Aussie8, and some very useful stuff there. Right, back onto this. So what we're going to need to do now, we are going to need to get some decent specs. So these are times 1.5, so that's not strong enough. I need some really good specs. You're going to need some good specs, and you're going to need a soldering iron with a sharpened tip. You can see I've sharpened the tip here because you need to get this little chappy off, and you don't want to damage everything else around there. It's very fine, so you need to get this off. This is information that Oleg has provided, and you'll probably need something like this, which we used to call a snot puller, but I'm sure there's a better name for it. That's when you've melted the solder. This causes a vacuum and sucks it up, gets rid of it, so you can take the component away. So we're going to plug the soldering iron in and turn it on, get it nice and hot. You don't want it to be too cold when you start. Let's get it nice and hot, and we're going to be desoldering starting with this, and then we'll go on to this and take these off. So let's get to it. So what I've done now is to move it so that I can get to this particular chip. Well, maybe I'll actually start with the bigger one and the easier one and just get my practice in over here. So over here I'm getting my snot puller close by here with my finger on the button. I'm going to melt the solder over here. There we are. We're about to do this one now, but as you can see, it's a very, very tight space. So got to get the soldering iron on there and then somehow lift this away. Or at least just to push it to one side, lever it off. Let's remove that carefully. Right, so we moved this little component, whatever it is. I actually don't know what it is, but Oleg says you have to remove it. So that was probably the most difficult part. And how to do it, just get a really sharp point on your soldering iron, and that kind of helps. Get some good lighting. As you can see, I've got my head torch on and my strong specs, and got in very carefully, and eventually actually with the soldering iron I melted and pried it up and then managed to break it off. So it's very difficult to get to it without some heat going into the components around there. So a little bit nerve-wracking there. Probably a good idea to use a really strong magnifying glass, one of those that sits over so that you can see well. Now we are ready to solder our wires on. Now Oleg recommends the use of a capacitor. So this is our capacitor here. So we're going to use this. Obviously this is the negative side, this is the positive side. But rather than actually soldering this on, we're going to put our negative on. You can bridge these. So you're going to solder a negative onto this side of these. I think these are some sort of MOSFETs or something. So you can bridge your negative all along there. We're just going to probably put a wire over 2 or 3 and solder that onto there. And then our positive goes onto there. And that should be the easy part. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a bit of a wire there, and then I'm going to put the capacitor onto there. I'm not going to put the capacitor directly onto there because that's just a lot more difficult to change it, etc. later on. So let's get to that. So we've soldered the 2 wires on. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to keep these at this length. I'm going to bare them, and then I'm going to use Wagos to connect up to the power source and to also connect the capacitor. So we're ready to put power into these wagers. Positive power here, negative power there. We have our capacitor there. This should fit in okay in the overall housing, and we'll probably just perhaps fasten this down onto here somewhere like that, just to keep it safe and sound and out of the way. This is the cable that plugs onto the board. As you can see, there are 4 pairs, so 8 wires. There is also a ground wire plus the shield. If we look over here, here comes the shield. It's got some sort of black, probably some sort of heat shrink going onto it. We're going to ignore, for the time being, we're going to do a bit of an experiment. It's unclear. There have been various discussions around the need for this and how this ties in with the power injection, the power over Ethernet. But because we're putting the power straight onto the board, I don't think this is required, so we're going to go with that. What I've also done, instead of getting RJ45 plugs and trying to get these in and crimp them and then discover that it's the wrong way around, etc., I've gone with one of these. So this just makes it easy. So pin number 1, pin number 8. We're going to go with this standard, the T568B format, which is this one here. Going to go with that and prepare this, and then we just need to get the power in and we are ready to roll. So let's get to that. That is ready. So let's just put it on there temporarily. So now we need some 12 volt, and there we go. We are ready to field test this now. So we got a dishy with everything connected. Got our 12 volt supply coming in and our network going out. So we're going to turn it up so that it can face there. Double check this. We've got the capacitor the right way around. So negative over here where the black is, and positive over there. And connected up to an OPS 100 battery. And we've connected this little travel router that we bought for it, USB powered, so I'll plug that in shortly. But first things first, I'm going to just lift this up just to check for sparks and smoke and things like that, and turn the battery on. And hopefully, so we have 12 volt power. I don't see any smoke. Don't see anything going wrong there. So let's turn this and get out of the way. And this can get, hopefully, a satellite fix. Plug this chappy in. And get onto iPad. In theory, this thing is all working now, connecting to the internet. So I've connected to my wireless router now, GL, iNet, whatever. So that's all connected. So to use David's terminology, we've Frankensteined this dish. He calls his Frank. So this will have to be Frank too. And it's worked. So thank you to David, and thank you to Richard from Australia or New Zealand, whichever it is. And thank you so much to Oleg back there in Ukraine. So this is really good news. We have connected. So now I need to get an active subscription, but I need to take this traveling to Australia for a bit. So that's going to be a very expensive month, about £250, I think, just to run this for a month. But it's going to be worth it because I do need to be connected. At least this has actually all worked. We are connected to the dish and it is searching And I'm going to get a subscription going shortly so that we can make sure that actually everything is tickety-boo working properly.